Hello, my name is Cristy Moran. I am a faculty librarian at Broward College in South Florida, based out of Fort Lauderdale. So I'm going to do a presentation today. As it's being recorded, I'm going to share my screen to walk through some PowerPoint slides as I speak. And there'll be a contact slide at the end. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me via email at my work email, which is cmoran, that is C as in the letter, MORAN at broward.edu. You'll have that contact slide at the end. I'm going to share my screen now and start my presentation. The title of this presentation is Metrics That Matter, Connecting Individualized Instruction to Confidence and Success. I've been working on the initiatives and the programs in this slide for years, some on my own and some in collaboration with my colleagues at Broward College in the library. So the agenda that I've laid out for this presentation is kind of going over the what and why of the Broward College Library's department goals, and then breaking down how we have since developed goals that are department goals and tied to the institution's strategic plan and strategic goals regarding and specifically targeting individualized information literacy instruction, which I typically refer to as individualized ILI, a virtual reference like LibChat, and embedded librarians, which is a practice that we've really kind of moved forward into because of COVID-19. And then the takeaways that I would like for you guys to have watching this based on the information that I've given. So first things first, this is where I work. Broward College, broward.edu, is a 4-year institution. That's how we're labeled. We're primarily an associate's college and a public institution. So we are what used to be a community college, and in Florida now is the Florida State College of Broward County, right? So we're just north of Miami-Dade County for those who don't know. We have and have been for the last few years. We were one of the initial kind of colleges that went through the guided pathways model. So that reorganized our entire institution, and we moved away from a campus by campus model, and instead looked at career pathways for students and kind of organized, what departments and what subject areas get matched beneath these umbrellas of pathways. We have 3 physical campuses. So that's the North, the Central, and the South campuses, and an online campus. Now, since COVID-19 in March 2020 until today, till May 2021, we have been operating almost entirely remote. So physical campuses have been at a minimum between March 2020 and at least right now, May 2021. And then we will be kind of expanding our return to campus, like on-site presence and for classes again in the fall semester of 2021. So as of fall 2019, according to IPEDS and the Broward College Institutional Research Department, which is a very robust department at our college, by the way, we have over 41,000 full-time students, of 41,000 students, I'm sorry about that. 71% of them are part-time. This aligns with the college trends. 29% are full-time. We are a minority serving institution. I think that's really important for me to mention. Absolutely every single time. Only 17% of our students at Broward College identify as a non-Latinx white person. That means that we are a vastly minority serving institution. The largest minority group self-identified is Hispanic or Latinx. And then the next is Black American, African American, and other Black American. And then of course there are other ethnicities and races also represented, but we are largely a vastly majority serving institution. We have, like very many other colleges and universities, more part-time instructional staff that is adjuncts rather than faculty instructors. And we do have something that's kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but it certainly is something I find to be rare, which is that although we have these different campuses, each of our campuses has a library partnership with a different institution. So Central Campus, which is located in Davie, has a partnership with Florida Atlantic University. Florida Atlantic University is based primarily out of the Boca Raton, Jupiter area. Well, we have that Broward presence of FAU at our Central Campus in Davie, Florida. So the library is actually shared a joint use partnership there. The North and South Campus libraries are both in partnership with the Broward County Public Library. However, both have different partnership agreements. So when I said each of our campuses has a totally different partnership, I meant that. Our online campus also serves our international education students. So that has centers all over the world that operate kind of with but semi-independently from Broward College. For all of our library access points and information centers, we have only 14 full-time librarians. On my campus, which is the North Campus, there are only 2 full-time librarians, and we have upwards, any semester upwards of 18,000 students to serve. All of that to say is that our department is a one college department. All of us report to the same associate dean, the same dean. We're in the same quote pathway, right? And so our department goals have done that same kind of move from being very unique to the campuses to how can we have a shared overarching goal that is the vision and the shared vision and the shared plan of the department. So the biggest questions we've always had as librarians has been, why are we measuring this and what are we measuring? For years, I started at Broward College in 2015. The goals were prescribed by the administration. Who is the administration? It could be a library department administrator, but oftentimes it was a campus administrator, campus president that might like the library on one campus and on another campus not be really keen on what even the library does. So there was a lot of, I guess we'll say, non-librarian identification of what is it that we do and what is it that we should assess or evaluate and communicate as the library's quote value. So in July, this kind of maps out the kind of life of our goals. In July 2016, we had to report institutionally weekly. This became a really big deal. And the goals were really highlighting how many students attended information literacy sessions, the things that we knew that were important, things like assessing academic growth, student senses of belonging, things like that weren't even in discussion. They were just using these like big numbers, right? That was one of our campus presidents, a former campus president of the library, kept stressing to me every time I would bring this up in a meeting, we need bigger numbers. Why don't we measure the things that we want, that you want to measure, Cristy? Well, because the numbers frankly aren't big enough. Well, if we measure all the students that we see in information literacy sessions, irrespective of the quality of those sessions, the amount of time of those sessions, the classes that those sessions occur in, we'll get bigger numbers, right? And those big numbers, as in like 4 digits as opposed to 3 digits, can be reported to the college president, and that'll make us look good. Again, irrespective of the value and the quality of the things that we were measuring. There was also the combination in a department with the academic success centers, which is our tutoring centers and our tutoring labs. Of course, these have thousands upon thousands of students coming in, spending time there to use the computers, to get to tutors, to get to the anatomy models, things of that nature, to use the textbooks reserves, which are housed, by the way, at least on my campus, in the Academic Success Center. And those head counts were then used as a comparison for the library, which we're not the Academic Success Center. That many students do not come into the libraries, or at least we can't measure them because, as aforementioned, we're in partnership with different institutions who, like the public library, refuse to do gate counts, right? And definitely don't distinguish between Broward County community members and Broward College community members. So in any event, these prescribed goals came top down with the intention of showing that we hit and touch a lot of people without really talking about what it is that we do. And when they did want to talk about the success rate of our library instructions, they looked at grades in those classes. Now, bear in mind, some of our one-shot instructions in some campuses, they don't even occur in an electronic classroom. There's no hands-on practices. It'll be a 15-minute lecture because that professor has allowed or encouraged or invited a librarian to come in, which is very different from an ongoing series of library instructions like we have on some campuses with some programs, or even a 50-minute library instruction or orientation with lots of hands-on practice. So it was really, to be cliche, it's apples and oranges, and we're calling them all the same fruit, right? So the libraries debated this. For years, we debated this. First of all, there's the logistical problem. I mentioned that the student to librarian ratio on my campus is 7,000 students to one librarian. If I was to hit one shot in every single class that had students writing or doing research papers on my campus, I couldn't. There's just an impossibility. We hit saturation very quickly. Plus, you get the issue that a lot of our professors don't want to have librarians come in. So that's out of our control, right? We hit saturation and it's unsustainable. There's the educational problem, which I mentioned before. The goals suggest claims not supported by evidence or research. And no amount of my educating or our educating of our administrators or stakeholders can make a sufficient enough argument that those bigger numbers don't make a compelling story, because everyone cares about the bigger number. And that's the true for everything. We also know, and something that many of us in the library really pushed back on, was that this kind of goal and prescribed goal measurement ignores crucial affective impacts of visiting the library. So we know from experiences and observations with students, conversations with students, surveys of students, that one of the most critical things that we provide is a sense of belonging to students. Many of our students are first generation students. Many of our students are English language learners. Many of our students are older students who are returning after being in the workforce for a really long time. I've had regularly students tell me, this didn't exist. Like online access did not exist when I was last in a writing class. And now I'm taking sociology classes just to finish that second half of the course load I need to get the credits for my associates, right? So it doesn't take into account the kinds of things that librarians experience and our students express about the value of the library. And then the COVID reality. So disproportionately, these goals would be affected by the transition to remote. And then, of course, the increased course load that we would have to take on. And this is irrespective of course area, right? Every single, and as I've mentioned, at Broward College, all of the courses went remote, all of them. And we remain remote. So if we had stuck to something like the head count of students who attend library instruction sessions as our sole goal to show that we are a useful unit at the college, we wouldn't be able to show much right now. So we decided, and it took years and hard work and leadership from the ground, right? From the librarians ourselves, what was meaningful for us. And then figuring out, well, based on these things that we find to be meaningful, that we can prioritize, how do we measure? What is it that we can tell? What is it that we can share? What is it that we can count? Taking advantage of the robust, as I mentioned, institutional research department that we have. We have a lot of tools to measure student success, to capture student data moving throughout the lifetime of the student. So the things that we kind of thought we can do this, there's really three main points, right? One, we could explore the possible correlation between other non-one-shot instructional settings and student success. So in other words, how else and where else do we librarians work with students, right? Outside of the one-shot library class instruction, where do we interact with students? Where do we do instruction? Where do we talk to these students? And we can explore measurements in those areas and in those interactions, right? So expanding beyond just counting the library class. Two, explicitly linking our practices to impact on student belonging, confidence, etc. So affective measures. So instead of just looking at how many students are in a class, how many students attend an event, how many students, instead of the how many, right? Instead of capturing these bigger numbers, capturing meaningful data, even from those smaller numbers and those smaller instances and from the individual interactions, and saying, well, how did I benefit you overall, right? And then third, layering and the potential of layering different assessments and evaluations to get a richer, deeper insight, which to me makes sense, right? So not only do I want to see how many people attend a class, but I want to see, well, yeah, that tells me I did a good job of outreach, or that these professors really like having librarians in class. But then what other assessments can I do? And what other more meaningful assessments can I do? Can I look at instruction, and can I look at assessments throughout an instruction? Can I look at learning artifacts that use information literacy skills and competencies in order to be able to complete them and say, oh yeah, look, it looks like the students are learning these things. So it's the ideas that we wanted to think beyond just the head count, right? And this was a direct result of librarians at the ground level on the field saying to administrators, no, actually, this is what we do, and this is what we find meaningful. And then kind of how building assessments and building evaluations, and then getting buy-in from the administration to use these measures for the success story, for the productivity, for the success of the library itself. So what things did we measure? Individualized ILI. At our campus, at North Campus, Victor, and that's my colleague there, and that's me there, back in the day when we were able to meet and have in-person instructions, would see students come in all the time. Beyond reference questions, these are students who had research needs, and often it was talking to them about things that we had maybe expressed or shown in a class that they needed to ask questions about, what we're ashamed or afraid to ask, or did it need to ask because at that time they weren't doing it, and now weeks later they actually have to apply those things that we taught. And so we found that we were doing this really rich, meaningful instruction at a one-on-one level with students, and we saw so many of these students. It's really difficult to express, even in numbers, how many students Victor and I alone on North Campus saw. And we started pushing this idea, we can do this. We can take what would have been normally maybe a quick reference question, bring these students back to our offices or to other, individual spaces and turn these into research consultations, something that is not often the experience of students at a community college, right? We give them this kind of really special, really meaningful, really personal instruction. And so we wanted to look at that and how successful that is versus the quote success rates of a class level, of the class as a whole, right? Well, how are these students doing? How are the students that we're reaching individually, and we know they're getting such nuanced, such meaningful help, they're asking so many questions, they're in conversation with us, right? Their anxiety is decreasing. Right now they feel a little more confident. How do those students do? Right. To me, that was very meaningful, and it remains meaningful. Right. So this is something that now we started measuring. So none of this negates the outreach efforts to classes and to doing class instruction, which, by the way, was something that came up as resistance to this from other librarians. Well, but if we reach out to so many students one-on-one, then what we're saying is that they don't need class instruction anymore. I don't think that's true. It doesn't negate that. We have as many class instructions, and we're still doing all of these student one-on-one appointments and research consultations. And in fact, those numbers both go up, right? And the reality is that some of those numbers of class instructions had gone down through no fault of our own. A lot of it had to do with the modality of instruction and the requirements and limited amount of in-person hours that a lot of our classes had, classes that historically hit us up for library instruction. And it also communicates student-centeredness. And key to that is that it's adaptable to a sudden remote transition. I had no lag time between going from aggressive in-person student research consultations to moving it to an online platform. First, we used the platform that we used for classes, which is at the time, and now it's being phased out, was D2L, and they have a Blackboard Collaborate feature. I set up a room for me, and suddenly, like next day, as soon as we went remote, students were making appointments to meet with me online and successfully did. And now we meet via Zoom, right? So it's very adaptable and very flexible as we change the tools that we use. Now Zoom is my link. It's been my Zoom room has been my Zoom link, or my meeting room for students since summer, right? Last summer. And that's not how it started. So what does it turn into, right? What does that mean? So we decided to look at two measures: successful course completion, right? And next semester retention. SRA stands for student research appointment. So that's what I'm talking about, the one-on-one, the individualized information literacy instruction. So we looked over the course of, since summer 2017, semester by semester, the success rates, right, of students who had a student research appointment versus those that didn't in the exact same classes. So these are the reference numbers from the classes. We're looking at any of the students who had a research appointment in that time, right, versus the students who didn't. And as you can see, for successful course completion, every single semester, students who, and some of this is self-selection bias, right? But it does tell a compelling story. The students who meet with us one-on-one do better overall in those courses than students who don't, right? The overall success rate in a course in fall 2020, 76.32. However, of the students who met with us from those same courses, 93.41% successfully completed the course. Right? So to me, that's compelling. And it's certainly compelling using the exact same models, the exact same label, the exact same success measure that the institution is using overall to measure different programs and different initiatives and different courses, right? And we see with retention, right? We see that with retention, we make even a better case, right? Students who see librarians seem to retain more highly consistently than students who don't. Of course, we need to take into account in the last two semesters that I picked up here, COVID-19, that absolutely had an impact on next semester retention, right? But if you look, the rates of students who met with librarians retaining to next semester is pretty consistent, right? We consistently meet with students and are able to kind of shepherd them into the next semester. I believe that's because of that affective data. And I believe that we have measures to show that beyond just this, right? That layered assessment. The way that I know that is because we built an assessment, a survey for individualized ILI. So a lot of this is based on ACRL's project outcomes, right? A lot of our surveys ideas are things I gathered from attending how many, training webinars and reading how many articles and following how many toolkits and responding to how many listservs, all about the ACRL project outcomes. And one of the takeaways that I had was probably my biggest takeaway from this was that an outcome survey can hit every student who met with us right after they meet with us. So earlier today, I had a student appointment with a student. We met via Zoom. When I mark her on my LibCal, which is how we do our student appointment scheduling, when I mark her as attended on my LibCal, she will automatically get an email responding saying, thank you for attending. Oh, by the way, here's a link to a survey. It'll take you 2 minutes. Let me know how this experience went. It'll help the library. And what does it do? It tells a student that we value their own experiences, right? Not just my experience, not just my observation, not just those metrics, right, that capture student success, because maybe the student wasn't successful in this class, but they still walked away with this idea of, I can do this, right? We gather affective information like sense of belonging, confidence in research, and library value to student. And one of the questions I ask is, how did you learn about us? And what we find, right, and I'll show you in a second, is that we can tie that to whether or not a student had a library instruction. So if you want these success rates, you have to have us come into your classes so that our students know you can meet with us. So the response rate, I just want to be sure, BC librarians met in fall 2020 with 800 students for individual research consultations, and over 800 students respond to the survey that same semester, right? So I think we get a pretty good response rate, and we definitely get a lot of comments and feedback that can be used to further tell the story of the library. So how did students learn they could meet with a librarian? This is a stat I show all the time. Librarian invited to teach session to class, 37% of students. Professor explicitly suggesting or requiring a meeting with a librarian, 50%. That means that 87% of the students who meet with us, so again, of the students who retain higher and successfully complete their course higher, 87% of these students, the library relied on the professor either including a librarian or including explicitly a library appointment, either by recommendation or by requirement. So that means that we rely on faculty who are directly teaching these classes to connect students to the library, and specifically to connect them to a librarian. So that is something that I rely on very much when I do outreach to our departments and during department meetings, right? This is what I tell deans. So we had virtual reference since I've been at Broward College. It was underutilized. Only sometimes somebody from the central campus would staff the virtual reference desk. There was no best practice. There was no set schedule. Not all the librarians were doing it. We used LibChat through the SpringShare platform, which is also the SpringShare platform is how we schedule. We use the LibCal to schedule student appointments. A couple of us thought, man, this is underutilized, and I bet we could reach students in meaningful ways, just like we do in person, if we give them an access point that's online, which, by the way, is where students are accessing the libraries. So the online librarian, Simone Williams, and I created a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning project when our college created a grant opportunity for us to like jump on, to take advantage of. So we created this project, and we engaged all the librarians to use this as a virtual access point for their reference, just like we do for in-person reference desk work. It's a cooperative model. It has to be college-wide, right? It wouldn't work if it was just me and Victor on North Campus doing it. We simply don't have the hours in the day. But with 14 librarians, we can cover all those hours. So we started, and this gives you an idea of the underutilization of it. I started measuring from 2016 to 2017 academic year, right? 2017 to 2018. And you could see like the numbers are really small. The reason that they're really small is because I updated this presentation. This was originally a presentation I was going to give a year ago in person at FLA. And so I didn't have data from the COVID remote period, right? So all these little smushed down, really tiny slivers of interactions were actually, they took up much more better space on my slide. But it ended up being that it's such a seamless transition for us for COVID. It kept the library alive. It showed, it demonstrated immediately that the library was already on these places. If nothing, moving remote during the COVID pandemic has showcased not only the library's value, but the library's ability to and flexibility to meet with students where they are absolutely anytime. We were ready. We were ready. We had a meeting when it was decided that we were going remote. And I said, let's just expand our project and ensure that everyone gets to be on the reference desk. Just like we would in real life and face-to-face life, we can be on it in virtual life, right? In our remote services, will never not be available to students. So even though prior to COVID, we saw a jump, look at that. In 2018 to 19, that purple area, that purple bar is when we were doing our project with just the slightest bit of promotion of virtual reference, right? And you saw one of the posters that we had, and we have bookmarks for this. With just the slightest bit of promotion, our numbers jumped. We did more in summer 2019 than we had historically done since we had LibChat, all simply by promoting that we had it. We continued to do it for fall 2019. So even prior to COVID, we were already doing virtual reference. And then, of course, spring 2019, when COVID hits and we all move remote, we get even more. And then in the summer of 2020, we have more than double the amount we had the year before, the exact same time. And as you could see from the fall 2020 numbers, we're still growing. We're still meeting with students. So this promotion, this idea we had just to utilize a service that had gone underutilized for so many years. This was, again, a librarian created this. It was me, a reference librarian on North Campus, and the online librarian, Simone. We said, we can do this. And it became so successful. This is now what's being reported to the college at large. We talk about this in college-wide town halls, right? The library's always here for you. Other services are trying to match our service model. And of course, instruction's changed. The needs of our students have changed. And embedded librarianship became a way for us to offer something new and something more nuanced and something richer to our students and our faculty as we went into now a fully remote instruction space. We had some embedded librarianship before. There were some, literally 2 professors who were embedded, that is, attending and supporting a class through multiple information literacy sessions and through different partnerships and levels of partnerships with professors who teach those classes. But when we went remote, all of our professors needed something. And needing something with all of our professors meant that we needed to be available to their students at all times. We needed to be able to provide, the kind of rich experience of having a librarian available to you. So some of us have become embedded in classes. And wouldn't you know it, it gives us again, an opportunity to evaluate and assess and tell the story of libraries and how we can meet students and faculty in courses where they are. So we can offer, and this is still in development, of course, layers of evaluation. So this is very easily gathered institutional level, quote, success data. As I mentioned before, we have a robust institutional research department. And we can gather information about those classes and their reference numbers and be able to see, well, if you had a librarian and you were in an ENC 1101 class, that had a higher success rate, say overall, than a class that didn't have a librarian in it of an ENC 1101 in the same semester. We're also piloting this semester, that is in spring 2021, a student experience survey. So some of us who are embedded in classes are providing a survey similar to the student outcome survey for individualized ILI. But for the students who are in an embedded class or a class that has an embedded librarian in it, some of us have successfully and others have attempted to try to assess the information literacy competencies or demonstrations of students who had an embedded librarian in their class through the same kind of, we have a general education college-wide assessment for information literacy. So we have a rubric already ready. And so some of us are trying to see are the information literacy outcomes of students in classes with an embedded librarian better? Are they stronger? Do they demonstrate information literacy competencies or in their papers more consistently or more thoroughly than students who don't have an embedded librarian in the same class but have a similar assignment? And of course, something that is a great selling point, certainly, is the experience of the faculty who are the primary faculty, so the primary course instructor who has invited a librarian in. What does that faculty member observe of their students who now have a librarian with them? My own experience talking to some of the professors that I embed in their classes is that they want me to keep coming back because they believe that their students are doing better, because they have this other person with my own kind of lens of expertise who can talk through some of these, challenges with students, who can also address them with a faculty member. And we can speak as peers about these things. These are things that tell the story of the library and can be used as assessments and evaluations of the program, again, in meaningful ways, in ways that would not have been identified by an administrator because they clearly were not identified from an administrator. So after all that, right, what are the takeaways that I want for you? So my final thoughts are that multifaceted value requires multifaceted assessments of values. If the library, right, does a variety of different things, if we have a variety of different service areas, if we believe that we impact our institutions, our students, our colleagues, our communities, our stakeholders in a variety of different ways, then we need to have a variety of assessments and evaluations to help us tell that story. We cannot just rely on one measure, right? Because it doesn't even fully tell the story of the one thing that it's measuring. right? So I believe, and my recommendation to any librarian watching this, and certainly to the administrators who are overseeing departments of librarians, is that we have to discover and we have to talk about, and that's how we discover what is it we want, or what is it that we think, or what is it that we know people are experiencing as a value of our interactions with them, of our spaces, of our services, and then attacking those interactions with a variety of different assessments or evaluations. They have to be different. They have to be different kinds of assessments, right? They can't all be measuring student success rates, right? They can't all be some arbitrary quantitative measure. They also have to tell a story. They also have to talk about affective things. They also have to talk about experiences. They also have to come up with ideas and feedback, right? So all of those things combined can tell a really rich story of our value. There's a way to use the language of our institutions to communicate what librarians do. I did not come up with the idea of student success measures. And frankly, I have my own feelings and thoughts that are not necessarily very positive about the kinds of measures that we use to tell the story of, quote, student success. However, I know that we could take advantage of that same language and of those same measures, the same priorities that the institution has. We can align with them within our department and tell a part of our story using those measures, those metrics, because it gets them to buy in using what they already believe about the institution and student success at large with what we do. We align with what they are already ascribing as their values. And then we fill the story with those affective things, with the stories themselves, right? With the words of the people that we touch. And we say, by the way, we also do this. We add and we create a really rich language for the library to tell its story. The library can also leverage institutional data tools rather than having to do everything in-house. So I mentioned ACRL project outcomes. We do not rely on ACRL project outcomes. In fact, it wasn't until I brought ACRL project outcomes to Broward College as a constant, like, hey guys, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. And then others of us started talking about it together and then bringing it. It wasn't until that we used anything other than the in-house tools. So we need to use, like I said, a variety of different types of assessments. We also need to leverage the tools that the college itself is using to measure student success data in other departments and the effectiveness of other departments. We need to be able to use those tools as well as the ones that are in-house at the library. We don't have to recreate any wheels though. They're already there. So I would say that that's probably one of the key things, is know what it is that you have access to at your institution and know what it is that the tools that you already use are capable of doing. So much of what we have is from a Qualtrics survey. That tool is provided by the college. So much of what we have is created through the institutional research department that uses Microsoft Power BI, among other tools. So we'll use that. So much of what we have is already built into SpringShare, right? They're statistics tools. These are basic tools that are available to us already that are using and capturing and sharing. So it's just a matter of knowing which statistics to look at, what data to look at, and then sharing that data along with the bigger picture value statements you want to make about the library, your department. We can scale impacts by participating in college-wide teaching and learning communities. So that is something that we took advantage of for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning project, right? We suddenly entered the library in the ring. We got awarded, we stood on a stage in front of the entire college, right? So all of a sudden, people started asking, what is it that you're working on? I saw that you got an award for something. And now people are asking me about LibChat, right? Oh, yeah, how did you guys schedule all of those meetings with students? I want to do that with my own students. Oh, it's a tool we have. It's called SpringShare. It's how we do the chat with students too. Oh, that's right. You guys also do chat with students. That was from Kim, a speech professor I've worked with for years at Broward College. She didn't even make the connection, and all she was asking for was a tool for her own use. right? How do you guys schedule, right? So these are ways, and by engaging in these larger departments, right, and these larger college communities and these larger peer communities, and talking to them about what it is we do, that's how we get buy-in for the little things that we do. Because really, LibChat is small, right? It's just one thing that we do. But the story gets told as we start engaging in those different teams, right? Bigger than just the library. So the library assesses information literacy, so do the college-wide assessment task forces for general education. How do they do that? Using a librarian created tool. Why? Because a librarian was sitting on all of those committees and said, we could do this. This is our area of expertise. You should let us do it. Right? And I always say something that our department struggles with, and I know that other departments do too, and other libraries, and so many of you sitting here hearing this, if indeed you exist, right? You're saying, oh, we capture all that data. Yeah. Does anyone talk about it though? And that's something I find challenging. I capture all this student outcomes data and I share it with the librarians. It's not meant for me to just tell us ourselves that we're doing something right. No, you got to take that info. You got to share it with your campus community. You got to take it to your pathway meetings. You have to take it to your, I don't know, emails that go out to the English department, right? It doesn't matter what you do if you don't talk about it in terms of data. Like if you don't talk about the data that you're capturing and what you want the story, what messaging you want to apply to that, then it doesn't matter that you're capturing data at all. Who cares? It's just then busy work. And we have plenty of things to do. We don't need another busy thing, right? If we're going to do data gathering, then we need to analyze that data. We need to share that data. If not, it's a waste of our time, right? And focusing on meaningful evaluation at the student level and the institution level also resulted for us in an increase of student engagement at every single point we chose to evaluate. And that is true. By being available for students in chat, we got more student appointments. By having more student appointments, we had more embedded librarians, right? How do I know this? Because those 259 student appointments from fall of 2017 or 2016 were largely mine and Victor's at North, right? That's true. It's sad, but it's true. But by engaging and constantly harping on how many students we're meeting, how well those students are doing, how the students are telling us that they're feeling about it, now more librarians wanted to be involved. Now more librarians wanted to offer this service. And that number went up. And then those librarians are telling the faculty that they work with and are showing and demonstrating to students in classes how to make those appointments. And then the numbers go up even more. And then we go remote and lose a bunch of students. And guess what? We still have a ton of students making one-on-one appointments with us. And then we bounce back. And even though we're remote and we can't meet with students one-on-one, some of us are meeting with students left and right on Zoom remotely. Why? Because we made the case this one time, right? And then the second time, and then the third time. And we constantly showcase the value of these things that we're doing, not just to one another, right? Because we need to make the case to one another, but to the community at large, to the stakeholders. Okay. This recording has probably gone on longer than I anticipated, right? And probably we would have so much conversation if we were in person. I take a lot of questions, I stop along the way. That obviously can't happen with a recording. So give you my contact slide. I'm at Broward College. I'm a faculty librarian there. Librarians are faculty at Broward College. My name is Cristy Moran. My email is cmoran@broward.edu. And you can visit the college library page at broward.edu/library. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've made it this far, or if you fast forwarded and just got back to the part where I'm at, thank you very much for your time. I hope to hear from some of you. I hope that what I've shown you is meaningful. I certainly am going to share it with my department and with my stakeholders, because like I said, what does it matter if I gather all this data and information if I don't share it with people who could do something with it and who frankly should be doing something with it, right? So have an excellent FLA if you are indeed watching this as a part of that. If you're not, have an excellent day. And thank you so much for giving me your time. Bye.